This is the Brave New Coin Crypto Conversation, hosted by Andy Pickering.
Hi everyone, Andy Pickering here. I'm your host and welcome to the Crypto Conversation, a Brave New Coin podcast where we talk to the people building the future in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. Now this is our third podcast and today I'm delighted to be joined by Brittany Laughlin. Brittany is a VC, she's a co-founder of Lattice Ventures. She spent time at Union Square Ventures, and Brittany handles investor relations at Blockstack, a decentralized computing network and app ecosystem. Now, Blockstack is very interesting because last week Blockstack made history when it became the first company in US history to receive SEC qualification for its digital token offering. So under the SEC Regulation A+ framework, Blockstack will conduct a $28 million cash offering that is accessible to any purchaser, accredited or non-accredited investors alike in the US and around the world. Now, this is a historic move by the SEC. Blockstack have been working on it for a long time, and it's being seen as a very, very positive move for the wider blockchain space because it provides a clearer legal framework for everyone going forward. I really enjoyed talking with Brittany. She does a really good job of explaining the Blockstack value proposition, the SEC announcement, and why it is such a big deal. And we also talk about her experiences as a VC, and then we finish off with a super fun round of hot takes and sci-fi geek outs. If you're enjoying the podcast, I would love it if you could give us a rating. Make sure you subscribe, even leave us a review. One day the decentralized web will take over, but for now we're still at the mercy of these algorithms that run the world, which is weird, right? So hey, give the podcast some love. We appreciate it. And now I reckon it's time. Let's get into another crypto conversation. Hello, Brittany.
Hi, how are you doing?
Doing really well. Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm here in Washington, D.C.
Fantastic. Hey, now, Brittany, I know you've been in the VC world and the blockchain space for a long time, and I know you've got some really interesting stories and unique perspectives. But for a number of reasons, Blockstack is really exciting right now. So I think if it's okay with you, I think we'll dive right into the good stuff. Let's talk about Blockstack first, and then after that, we'll talk about the wild and wonderful world of VC. How does that sound?
That sounds great for me. Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's talk Blockstack and let's talk decentralization. So one of the things I find interesting about Blockstack is more than I think a lot of projects in the blockchain space, you know, maybe Bitcoin aside, at a high level, Blockstack really speaks to the core principles of blockchain and this idea of a decentralized internet, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, kind of the founding of Blockstack was when Manib was at Princeton, along with Ryan, and this idea came about how do you build a more secure internet? And in their research, they actually came to the conclusion that blockchains would be a great way to help provide that more secure internet. So the roots of the company are definitely in this idea that blockchains are actually a solution to a problem, not just, cool technology that should be implemented in every startup. So that was kind of the origins.
That's right. So let's try and unpack this a little bit. So as you say, Blockstack was founded in 2013 by Manib Ali and Ryan Shih, and they met in the computer science department at Princeton University. And I think Manib has a PhD in distributed systems from Princeton. What's interesting about that is, so if Blockstack was founded in 2013, that means Blockstack is 6 years old, which is like pre-Ethereum.
That's correct. Yeah. So Ethereum hadn't come out yet. This was kind of the days of mostly Bitcoin tech. So when I was at Union Square Ventures, we called the technology Bitcoin tech. From 2013 to 2016, I was there, starting with Coinbase was our first investment in the space in 2013. And at the time, their goal was only to support Bitcoin because all of these other currencies or tokens didn't exist yet. So yeah, Blockstack was there right at the beginning.
And so Blockstack is described as I think the easy way to describe it is as a decentralized computing platform that puts users in control of their data and identity. Is that about right?
Yeah, nailed it. You must be reading our website. So
certainly am.
Yeah, so the way to think about Blockstack is that it's a tool, a set of tools for developers to be able to leverage decentralized tech in a very easy to use way. So even if you aren't a blockchain developer, if you want to be able to have the benefits of this decentralized tech, which includes everything from, user-controlled storage, users being able to have a universal ID instead of having to have multiple logins, Blockstack is the tool for developers like you.
So essentially, Blockstack is a decentralized computing network. It lets developers build their own secure applications. Users are in control of their data, and I think Blockstack already supports more than 160 different applications. You've got solutions for, as you say, blogging, fundraising, content collab, secure email. So I was having a play around with Blockstack myself yesterday, and it's quite easy to get started, right? You can just set up your ID. All you need to do that is really just an email address, and then you set up a password, and that's all the information you're ever asked for. And from there, you can just go and start playing around with the different applications, right?
Yeah, that's correct. So that's your Blockstack ID. So then you can, mine is Brittany.id, and I can use that to log into any of the applications. But what that's actually doing is it's creating a unique name for you. So no one else can actually take your unique user ID. Because you have it, it will be registered in the blockchain. And then on top of that, you can, kind of log in. You can use that as your wallet using your ID to log in. So there's a lot of things that can be leveraged on top of that ID once you set one up. But as you said, it is a pretty simple process. It should take, maybe 1 to 2 minutes at max to get that set up.
Yeah, and I think it's worth just talking about this a little bit more because, as you say, one of the key features of Blockstack is this single sign-on ID, and obviously it uses public key cryptography for authentication, which makes it very secure. But it is one single ID for the whole system, which, when you first say that, it sounds quite Orwellian. Do you know what I mean? But in fact, it's the complete opposite. Can you sort of explain what the benefits are of just having that one ID and why it actually makes it, really secure and in terms of, the privacy benefits for users?
Yeah, so I think the way to think about the ID is that it's something that you control and it's actually logged on the blockchain. So unlike an email or an account, when I set up a Facebook account and I log in, Facebook is the only one who can verify that is my unique login. So if Facebook decides to block me, or if they turn off their system one day, that ID that I created with Facebook has no use anywhere else. So instead, with Blockstack, if you set up your ID, even if Blockstack PBC decides they want to, get rid of IDs, you still own your ID. It actually belongs with the blockchain network, not with a single company. And what's really great about that for users as well as dApp developers, it means that every time you use a different Blockstack application, you don't have to set up a new ID. You don't have to leave kind of personal information around the web by registering all of these different IDs, email addresses, passwords. Instead, by using your ID, that gives you access. And then when you no longer want to use that application anymore, they can no longer access your data if you so choose. You can kind of turn that off. So to me, I look at how many accounts that I have set up over the internet over the years, everything from testing, new mobile apps to services I use every day. And there's a lot of data about me that's just sitting in all these different servers. And it's very hard to delete it. It's very hard to change it. And Blockstack ID is meant to help make that a lot easier and a lot more secure for the user.
And one of the cool things about it, Brittany, also is you really only need to remember your one password instead of having to use a password manager or remembering all these, random passwords for these random accounts that, as you say, you forget you even have, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And, I'm sure other people listening have had this issue where you realize that maybe you have really old accounts that have an old password, and then those accounts get hacked, and then you have to basically log in to delete those, accounts for an application you maybe tried out like 4 years ago and you just forgot you even had. So, I think just this idea of like cleaning up your own data all over the web to me is really appealing. But to your point too, it's just one password to remember. And if you want to have multiple IDs on Blockstack, you can register those as well. So, if you have a business account and then you have a personal account, it doesn't limit you to only having one ever. But, we like to let people know that hopefully you only need one.
Exactly right. Now, Brittany, I just want to kind of zoom out and try and put this in a more macro computing context, if I can, for the listeners. And maybe you can help me here because it's a little bit technical, but there's a really nice, I guess it's a graph on your website, and it's looking at computing eras from the beginning. So if the computing era started off in the 1960s with the mainframe era, right? These massive, IBM machines that took up whole rooms. And then in 1980, the desktop era kicked off. And through to, I think, around the year 2000, it's called, the cloud era. So that's when everyone's information starts going up into the cloud. And that's kind of where we are right now. And then you say that, or Blockstack says in 2020 is kind of the kickoff of this era of decentralization, which is what Blockstack is trying to enable. And, I think you would make the argument that we're just kind of in this transition into the decentralized era right now, which obviously blockchains enable. But it was kind of the cloud era, which is characterized by the big tech companies, Amazon, Facebook, Google. And that's where we've got into trouble, right? With, these, everyone's data is up in the cloud, which leads to a loss of privacy. People can get hacked, this advertising model that uses people's data. So that's kind of where we are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's a great assessment of this visual that we have. It's also on our website. So these are kind of the eras of computing. And the thing that you pointed out was, there's been shifts from mainframe to desktop to cloud to decentralized. And each of those is a swing from very centralized to decentralized, back to centralized, and now we're having this swing to decentralized. So mainframe computers, all of the data and compute was happening in one large place. IBM was definitely creating a monopoly because they made hardware and it was very expensive and most people went with IBM. Now, Microsoft came along and they decided that, they wouldn't charge people very much for the hardware. That's how we got sort of the desktops in everyone's homes, everyone's offices, and instead they would charge you for the software. So their monopoly was largely around software. And then we saw this shift to the cloud, which was back to centralizing everything in one place, this time on a cloud, not just hardware. But what Google did was they said, hey, Microsoft has a monopoly by charging for software. We're going to make software free, and instead we're going to monetize user data. And that's kind of the era we've been living in for, a long time now. So I'm sure there are people who remember when Google didn't exist, this idea of free software, free spreadsheet software, free Word software, that was not the era of computing that most of us probably learned on. But now in the decentralized phase, it's because all of these big cloud computers or cloud compute companies are monetizing on user data. What if instead we make it so that user data is no longer valuable in the same way that software no longer became valuable? And the way that we think that you could do that is by giving the data back to the users, giving them control, giving them access, and using things like cryptography in order to secure transactions on the web so people don't need to trust a cloud provider in order to feel secure and to be able to transact on the internet. So, this is the early days of the phase. But I think that you see, even with big companies like Facebook trying to get into this decentralized computing space, that it's really coming full circle to people moving away from traditional cloud.
I think you're right, Brittany. So Chris Dixon, right? You probably know Chris. He's a partner at Andreessen Horowitz, right? He wrote an amazing essay at the start of 2018 called Why Decentralization Matters. And the essay is on Medium. I'll put the link in the show notes because it's a really good read. But I just want to quote what Chris said. And he said something like, the question of whether decentralized or centralized systems will win the next era of the internet reduces down to who will build the most compelling products, which in turn reduces down to who gets the best developers and entrepreneurs. So this really speaks to Blockstack, right? Can you, does that make sense to you, what Chris said there?
Yeah, I know exactly the post that you're talking about. I think Chris has been, a big advocate in the space and also a longtime investor in the space.
Yep.
I think that developers matter. They have since the beginning of the internet, even before that, the beginning of computing. And we think that users of the internet are looking for things that solve real problems. And by creating new tools for developers to use to help solve those problems, that's where you're going to get the most interesting projects kind of emerging. Even if you look at mobile, it wasn't necessarily a big computing shift. It kind of was an interface shift. But we saw companies come out of it like Uber that couldn't have existed as a desktop application. And by programs like Apple and Google opening up all their software, making it really easy for developers to learn, making it easy for people to ship applications, make updates, make changes, we think that that is what helped lead to these innovations like Uber. Because the early days of mobile, most of the applications were just replicas of what was on the web at the time. So what was on desktop is what you got on mobile. And it took just a little bit of time for people to really understand, like, wow, having real-time location is important. Having, your internet with you everywhere you go, it just gives you so many new ways that you can build things. And Facebook and Google did not come up with the idea for something like Uber. This came because independent developers took the risk to do that. And we think with Blockstack, it's going to be the same. Decentralized tech is going to be built by scrappy developers who are interested in solving user problems. And by using a tool like Blockstack, which is really easy to learn and has a growing community, they'll be able to kind of experiment and grow things. That's why, we've had over 170 applications now built on top of Blockstack, most of which have just happened in the past few months. So like since April, we had 80 and now we have over 90 more. So it's been a pretty short time frame, but we think it's because people are learning how easy it is to, spin up things that they've been thinking about for a long time.
Whether you're an enterprise fund manager or a retail trader, buying and selling cryptocurrencies successfully requires price discovery you can rely on. Brave New Coin's liquid indices provide trusted US dollar prices for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Ripple. Featuring end-of-day or intraday outputs, you can count on the BLX, ELX, and XRPLX for accurate US dollar pricing for smart contract oracles, settlement price discovery, net asset valuation, and performance analysis. Visit bravenewcoin.com to find out more.
Users are unlikely to migrate away from Google or Facebook on ideological conviction alone, right? People are lazy. They don't really care about privacy. They just want convenience. They want their nice, shiny digital things. So to really build a massive user base, Blockstack, you guys need to provide a big basket of applications that are essentially equal or better to what people use today, right? With that same sexy, intuitive UI, UX. Now, I think in that post by Chris Dixon that I mentioned before, he called this the chicken and the egg problem. So it's difficult to get new users onto a platform without compelling applications, but it's difficult to get developers to build those compelling applications if the users aren't there. So I guess what I'm trying to say is to try and solve this problem, you guys have kind of come up with a kind of token economy to attract developers, right?
Yeah. So that's a great point. Internally, we kind of have a nickname for this app in which, like Chris Dixon describes, we call it kind of like the Apollo app, which is the application that emerges that really pulls people into the decentralized technology field because it's so compelling or it solves such a big problem that millions of users will sign up within the first year for a particular application. So so the Apollo app is something that we keep in mind when we think about how to best serve developers to be able to build that Apollo app. And one of the things you mentioned is around our token economy. So one of the app growth engines that we have is called app mining. So app mining is a program where we reward developers for building quality applications on Blockstack.
Yes.
So in a similar way that Bitcoin rewards early miners for securing the network, Blockstack rewards early developers for building value on the network. So the way that app mining program works is if you build an application on top of Blockstack, you can submit it to app mining. And then each month we have a number of independent reviewers who go through and review all of those apps based on different things like, UX, usability, how well they're using the decentralized technology that we're providing, how much awareness do they have in the community. All of those different factors add up to a score. And then from that score, you can actually earn real money for providing value. So we actually just made an announcement yesterday about the app mining program because we have been doing rewards up to $100,000 a month. And now over the next few months, we will be ramping that number ultimately up to $1 million in payouts per month for developers. So we view this as a great way to for developers to bootstrap ideas, to get their products into the market and see if they work. And it's open to anyone in the community. So you don't really need to go apply to an accelerator. You don't need to pitch a VC. If you're building a high quality application on Blockstack, you can enroll in app mining and see if your app ranks to get rewarded.
Well, I think that's a good incentive for any smart developers out there who are interested in helping build out the decentralized ecosystem. As I say, Brittany, I had to play around with some of the apps yesterday, and I think I tried. There was a social media one called Banter, which was pretty basic. There was a Bitcoin tipping platform app called Bottle, which was that one was pretty cool. And then I think the other one I tried is Graphite, which I think is one of the the hero apps for Blockstack at the moment, which is it's essentially a decentralized form of Google Docs, right? So your docs are up in like the equivalent of the cloud, except they're not in the cloud. Google can't get a hold of them. They're safe on a blockchain, completely private. So that's the use case there is for whistleblowers or journalists or people in countries with not so nice governments, right?
Yeah, I mean, Google isn't accessible in every country as well. So I think Justin from Graphite, the founder of Graphite, he is very active in our community, and he's often spoken about how he's learned about all these different use cases for his app after he built it. Because he built it with, he didn't want Google to be able to mine his data that he was creating and sharing. And that was kind of his prerogative. But then a number of people have come forward and said they've used it for all of these various reasons that you kind of mentioned, as well as people just being interested in keeping their data safe and secure. So, I think some of the other apps that people have, I like using on Blockstack are Dmail, which is a decentralized mail kind of competitor. So all of your messages are encrypted end to end, but instead of being like a messenger, it's actually like email where I can send a message, people can reply. It's a pretty cool one to check out, as well as you mentioned Bottle, but BitPatron is another one where you can kind of tip independent creatives using cryptocurrency as well, instead of using a platform where they could get blocked or their payment could get censored. So I think that one was very timely, especially as Patreon started having to kick people off the platform or couldn't make payments to them. So yeah, I think that I think over half of the apps that exist are only a few weeks old. So, I think they're ramping up their UI, they're getting feedback, they're starting to just really build out quality experiences. So I'd encourage anyone here that's listening, you can see the whole list at app.co, and you can kind of see them ranked as well. So you could go through and see who's been earning the most payouts in app mining over the past 2 months.
Nice. Hey, now finally on Blockstack, Brittany. Blockstack actually made history last week when I think it became officially the first company in US history to receive SEC qualification for a digital token offering, which for the digital token is Stacks. So under the SEC Regulation A+ framework, I think that's how you say it,
Yeah.
Blockstack will conduct a $28 million cash offering accessible to any purchaser who wants to take part in the future of decentralized computing. This sounds like it's an ad. But so I think the key here is what it means, and maybe you can explain this, but what's the why is this a historic move?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, we were the first project qualified by the SEC. I, of course, have to let you know that the full disclaimer on anything I'm mentioning is at stackstoken.com/ hashtag disclaimer. So you can also find it at the bottom.
Not financial advice. Not financial
This is not
advice.
financial advice. I may make future, forward-looking statements. That's all to be assumed.
Go for gold. We're in crypto. We understand that.
Yeah. Never did I think I would be making so many disclaimers being a technology worker. But so what makes us so landmark is that this regulatory framework has never been used for a crypto project before. In fact, it's legislation that was, or it's regulation that was based off of I think it's like 1933, Howey test. And the fact that the SEC has qualified our offering means that we're really making history for crypto. The fact that decentralized tech can move forward is in a regulated way in the US is huge news. So we're really excited about that. But I think what that kind of means for us is we wanted to be able to offer Stacks tokens to anyone in our community. And in 2017, we did a token offering, but because of regulation, we were unable to offer it to anyone who wasn't an accredited investor. So that left out a huge number of people, any sort of developers or community members who could not participate. We offered them vouchers to come back and participate at a later date, given the same price as the 2017, because we knew that giving a regulated offering would allow them access to our network. It would be able to fulfill our vision around supporting developers and giving them great tools that they could use, including tokens that they could purchase and hold without the risk of regulatory scrutiny. And then I think it also means that companies who want to participate in the Stacks network, or if they want to hold Stacks tokens, they aren't at risk of regulatory. It also means that we're opening up to the US small investors as well. Some of the other projects in the ecosystem, they've decided to just exclude US investors completely because they don't want to go through regulation, or there was an existing regulation they thought they could use. So this offering means not only for Blockstack, but for other projects, there's now a framework in which you can do a compliant offering in the US to every member of your community.
So I think that the easiest way to understand it, Brittany, then is it's kind of like the same way the ICO boom, if you like, was happening and anyone in the world could participate, except the problem was, the legalities of that were extremely vague. But with this new Blockstack offering, which is the first one approved by the SEC, as you say, normal everyday people, not just accredited investors, can participate, but this time it's essentially been given the green light from the SEC, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I think the big thing to note is that because we did this filing with the SEC, all of the disclosures about the project, about the risks, about our financial statements, all of that is public information. So we filed that. You can go to stackstoken.com/circular. and that will give you a direct link to I think it's 180 plus pages of our offering document. So unlike the ICOs of 2017, this is incredibly detailed information about the company, about the risk factors, audits done on financials. All of those pieces are in there. So we really want investors or community members, whoever they are, to be fully informed before they make a purchase in a sale like this. And I think that kind of that was not the standard of some of the ICOs we remember from 2017. So
no, I mean,
I think,
certainly not. And there's not too many of those ICOs are looking to flash right about now. Well, speaking of which, I know, Brittany, a lot of work must have gone on behind the scenes. Can you talk specifically about some of the steps that Blockstack had to undertake to meet the SEC's requirements, and what did that look like?
Yeah, so because of regulation, I can only comment so much on the exact process. As I mentioned, we have publicly filed our offering, not only the one for the sale that was approved, but you can go back on the SEC website and you can actually see our filings since April when we started to publicly file. So some of that progress you can see in black and white then. But I think the thing to note is that, we were the first project to be qualified, but very soon after, there was another project that was qualified the next day, and it's a project that we've known for a long time, and we've been, trying to help each other along the way. And now that I think these qualified offerings have happened, going forward, we will be able to share more about the process and hopefully be able to set a path that other companies or other projects could go down if they want to offer the same type of offering down the road. So it was a lot of hard work done behind the scenes that I can't go into great detail, but
sure.
Hopefully we'll have more we can share once this offering is closed.
Okay, sure. Now, just to finish off on the Blockstack stuff, so I noticed that in the SEC filing, I think, which is very long, and I didn't read all of it, but I did flick through, and it says that you have something like 115,000 user accounts, but under 10,000 of these are verified, and I think under 10,000 are actually downloading apps. Can you put that in context? Is that a concern, and what's the roadmap for how do you grow that? Yeah,
so we actually have a blog post out today, just kind of answering some of these questions. That question has come up in the community as well around what is a verified user versus a registered user. So verified users, we use that to mean socially verified. So for a while we offered when you registered your ID, you could also socially verify it by tweeting it, posting it on Facebook, posting it on LinkedIn, and then people from your social community could, view that, and that would give you social verification. So that number around verified accounts, that's actually a social verification measure that we use. The 100,000 plus users that we have, so those numbers are numbers that we filed with the SEC. Those are the numbers that we have for people who've created IDs on the network. You can see a lot of these in our Block Explorer, but kind of by design, we don't actually track users' data. So the number of applications that they use is not publicly accessible information. We don't have that information. We wouldn't be able to tell you how many users each application has. The only numbers that we kind of have to report are based on whether a user is using a social feature within the app in which they would share their data with another user in that app. So we have something called multiplayer storage where, a user could, if I wanted to share photos that I uploaded to my, Blockstack DApp with you, then that activity would be searchable and we could track those numbers. But if I wanted to keep my, my Graphite docs private and I didn't actually share anyone to collaborate with me on it, then you wouldn't be able to count that user number anywhere publicly. So I think with user numbers, we acknowledged that in the cloud world, it was very clear to track user accounts. But in the decentralized world, we have, proactively not tried to track every user.
That makes sense. All right. Well, I'll look forward to reading that blog post, and we'll see if we can put that in the show notes as well. Brittany, let's change track just a little bit, because I know you're a VC, and that kind of space is quite interesting to a lot of people, myself included. So I think you started out in the New York tech startup scene, right? And I think you ended up kind of being headhunted by Fred Wilson from Union Square Ventures. Can you just sort of maybe just briefly tell us some background there? What was that scene like?
Yeah, so I started as an entrepreneur. I built 2 businesses before I joined Union Square Ventures. One of them was a venture-backed startup in the travel space, which was eventually sold to Groupon. And then another company was more in the education space, and that company was merged with a nonprofit. So had, my experiences of companies, successes, struggles, exits. And I was in the New York community when I randomly got a message about coming to meet Fred at the USV offices. So it was a little bit of a, a shock of like, what is this about? It was when I was running my education company, so I thought it was something related to that. And when I showed up, it was actually a job interview. So they had gotten my name from some of the members of their USV network because they were looking for someone to help with the network. And it seemed like a great opportunity. They also gave me the opportunity to continue to run my business on the side, which was a great sort of outcome for the business at the time. And I was there for just over 3 years. I sat on our investment team. I also helped build out our network of, founders and operators at our then like 50 plus companies.
And was it during your time at Union Square where is that when you sort of first were introduced to, I guess, blockchain? And because I know you guys invested in Coinbase. I have it here somewhere. What year was that? That was quite early.
Yeah, in 2013 we invested in Coinbase. We met them when they just came out of Y Combinator. So what's funny is that we actually met, I think, with any startup that had to do with Bitcoin or blockchain at the time. And there were some real characters that we got to meet with during that time. So real crypto OGs,
yes.
And at the time, I remember that there weren't a lot of other VC funds that wanted to fund anything in the blockchain space, or at that time we called it, the Bitcoin tech space. And so we ended up doing seed rounds for a number of companies from 2013 I think to 2015, because we were the only VC firm that really was willing to take the risk on investing in these types of companies. That obviously has changed a lot now, but like for Blockstack, for instance, we invested in the seed round, IPFS, Media Chain, and Open Bazaar. Those were other investments that we made during a similar time. So it's evolved quite a bit. But yeah, during that time, our team was very focused on learning as much as we possibly could, even though people thought we were a little crazy at the time.
I can only imagine. And I know that you have since founded your own company that's called Lattice Ventures.
That's correct. Yeah. So so I was at Union Square Ventures just over 3 years. And then I wanted to continue to invest at the earliest stages. So I saw just a gap in where entrepreneurs needed early funding. They had network effect businesses, and they were looking for investors to kind of help them understand what does it take to go from the seed to the Series A level. So myself and my partner Vanessa, we built Lattice, and we deployed that capital into 16 companies over that time. And so that portfolio continues to grow. So it's been great being able to participate not only in early stage startups, but about 20% of that portfolio is also in the blockchain space.
Looking for near real-time crypto asset spot rates for everything from Tron to Monero or Doge to BNB? Brave New Coin's GWA and MWA crypto APIs calculate a fair price for over 1,500 assets and 6,000 pairs across the global network of crypto exchanges. At 30-second tick intervals and available via streaming or REST API, Brave New Coin's GWA and MWA APIs deliver independent third-party price discovery you can rely on.
I think you and Vanessa have talked about empowering innovation at the edges. What do you mean when you say the edges?
Yeah, doesn't that sound great?
I love that, by the way. It's fantastic.
Yeah, well, we think that, not all the ideas are mainstream. And, I think at the time I was getting sick of seeing startups that were another food delivery company, another, social application that was going to be the next Snapchat. And so we were really looking for entrepreneurs who had unique ideas about problems that they were uniquely equipped to solve. And so those kind of edges are really important. And I think it's a reason why our portfolio is very diverse in terms of the backgrounds of the founders, as well as their, histories. So that diversity of ideas and experiences, I think, makes great companies. And a lot of our companies sit outside of the traditional categories like e-commerce or, social mobile applications.
And how is the, the blockchain VC thesis? It must evolve very fast as the crypto space obviously evolves extremely quickly. But can you talk about what the VC thesis was back in, say, 2013, 2014 versus, where it is today?
Yeah, so, 2013 at USV, our thinking was how our current incumbents like Facebook, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, how are those companies going to be disrupted? Because it seems like most of the companies we were seeing at the time, they were going to either be acquired by one of those big companies or outcompeted by one of those companies. So where is there room for innovation? And our belief was that you have to use technology that they cannot compete on. And we realized that this thread of decentralized tech was taking data away from centralized places and giving it back to the user. That could be a really powerful way, because no way is Google going to give up user data. So the only way to compete with them is to do something that they are unwilling to do. So that was kind of our thesis around the time. And that's how we ended up investing in Blockstack, is looking for non-financial applications of the blockchain. So obviously our bet on Coinbase was very financial focused, but Blockstack fit this idea that there would be ways that people would implement this technology that would have nothing to do with just the, finance trading side that we saw in a Coinbase's wallet and things like that.
Sure.
So that, it was 2013 to 2014. The evolution of the thinking was, okay, once more protocols and more technology was developed, then where is there going to be power that aggregates? Is it going to be at the protocol layer? Many people will refer to the FAT protocol thesis, which was a USV published blog post. It was something the team put together. Joel Monero worked very hard on that. And the thought was all the value is going to go to the protocol. I think even now there's been some evolution in thinking that it's not actually the protocol. There will probably be a handful of successful protocols, but applications built on top are what are really important. And that kind of goes back to Chris Dixon's thesis around, whatever people are using, the end user, that's what's going to accumulate a lot of value. And, my belief is if you can get access to the value of all of the applications built on top of a network, that's what makes protocols really valuable, like Blockstack.
Right. And I think what's amazing about all this, Brittany, is, back in 2013, when you guys would have just been starting to look at, talk to Coinbase and then these, Silicon Valley early crypto startups which would have been pretty scary, hairy, rough and ready and real cypherpunk stuff, right? But now you have
lots of Silk Road people
for sure. But now, just this week, obviously, well, right now today, we've got the Facebook Libra hearings in the U.S. Senate, which has been amazing to watch. And of course, Donald Trump tweeted a couple of days ago about Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies and the Libra, and he wasn't really a fan of any of it. What did you think of Donald Trump's tweet?
Yeah, so it actually I think his tweet was right around when our SEC qualification had just happened, and he kind of calls out like, oh, these aren't regulated, and we were like, well, actually ours is regulated in some ways, but no, I think the fact that the president of the United States is actually talking about blockchain tech is a huge move forward for the industry, because it means that you can't ignore it anymore. It's not just something that's kind of at the edge, it's something that's becoming more mainstream. We're seeing this with the Libra talks as well. The fact that one of the largest companies in the US is opening up a whole separate brand and company dedicated to doing research and development in this space is huge. It just really legitimizes the space. Bitcoin has been around for a decade or so. So the fact that 10 years later, we're really seeing mainstream conversations of this and a growing adoption. I think it's great for everyone in the industry, even if there's still a number of things to be worked out on the regulation and adoption front.
Yeah, look, I completely agree, and it's fantastic that Bitcoin cryptocurrency is now at the forefront of, I guess, public discussion, the political agenda. It looks like crypto might be a big part of the American election debate. And with the Facebook Libra, do you have an opinion there? What do you think? What's your take on Libra?
Yeah, so our CEO, Manib, has he's spoken about this to a number of people this week. Obviously, it's very timely along with our qualification. So, I think what he says, I'll kind of echo, is just that we've heard about the Facebook project a long time ago. Manib has met with the head of the team. I think that it's a good thing for the industry. I don't see it as a direct competitor to Blockstack. I think that, because Blockstack's technology can be implemented with a lot of different other technology, like you don't have to just use Blockstack ID only. You could integrate other IDs, you could use other tech. Like there's ways to be collaborative with a project like Libra or others down the road. So I think that, we're optimistic that they're going to actually help bring decentralized tech to the mainstream. Of course, that being said, we're also cautious because we know that they are creating a lot of noise and creating a lot of focus on this space. And if they're not careful, we don't want them to take missteps that would, somehow make it like impossible for other developers to build on any kind of tech because it gets shut down. So I think the stuff that's happening in Washington today, we are cautiously optimistic about the outcome.
Nice. Hey, Brittany, I know you've spoken a lot about the importance of communities in crypto and also the importance of diversity in tech. I'd be interested to get your take on where you think things are at.
Yeah, so that's a great question. I mean, I think, from the community front, we've seen a huge growth in our community, and I know that other projects have as well. And, we have a number of developers as part of that community, but it's not just limited to that population. We have different people who are actively like hosting meetups. We see people jumping in and answering questions. We see people helping use dApps and give them feedback. There's all sorts of roles that people can play in the community. It's not just developers, because, addressing the diversity question, I think that the large percentage of crypto developers are male. The large percentage of cryptocurrency holders are male, and I think that only represents half the population. So seeing more women get involved in different areas of the business, whether they're a developer or whether they're designers or community members. All of those roles are open, and we want people to feel like the community is accessible to everyone. My past few days of being very active in our Telegram support channel, we know that there are a lot of spammers and trolls that will go after anyone,
yes.
Especially in like Reddit and different places,
yeah.
Twitter. So no matter what your background is, I think that is unfortunately still a big part of the crypto industry in general. And I think those people are edge cases, but when they come up, it's not a very pleasant experience. So I hope no one has a negative community experience anywhere in the crypto industry. But if they do, we've got your back. I've got your back. I've been there as well. So I think that those issues still plague everyone. But for the most part, it's a very welcoming crypto community in general. So I've been part of it since 2013, and I've only met incredible people, really interesting thoughts, and anyone who doesn't fit that bill is, there's plenty of other people to talk to.
Nice. And look, Brittany, I think, there are trolls out there on Reddit or Twitter particularly, and you're right, they are, and Telegram, and, in crypto, that is a lot of people's experience, but I think that's just part of being online, right? Politics, Twitter is full of trolls. There's, that's just modern life, isn't it?
Yeah. So, I think it's like, if people impersonate me on Telegram, should I be flattered or should I be offended? I guess the takeaway is like, if I'm asking you to send ETH to some random address in a DM, it's probably not me.
And just on the diversity front, you might be interested to know. So our wider company, the TechME Group, Brittany, we have 115 people across the group, and we are 77% male, which is still, pretty high, but we're 23% female, so almost a quarter. And of that 115 people, we have 29 different countries represented. And I think that's pretty typical of crypto and tech, right? Because a lot of these companies tend to be distributed across the world with different developers and people just coming from wherever, right?
Yeah, exactly. Our team we're about 30 people, and we have the backgrounds of people is fairly diverse, and I think the gender ratio is probably similar to your company, maybe just a little bit more. I have to double check on the count on that, but I think that diversity is really important, and companies who don't prioritize it are missing out on a competitive advantage. So I'm a huge advocate that companies should pay attention and make sure that they are getting kind of this diversity of thought in the organization, especially to your point around, it's not just gender diversity, it's also geographic diversity. I think in our community, we have thousands of people from all over the world, and we've only seen that increase. It's part of the reasons why we've been translating our white paper into Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and Spanish. We see that those communities are really emerging, and we want to make sure to be inclusive of them as well, and especially the language diversity of those people. So, but that's great. It sounds like your company has a big focus on it, and you're actually, changing the ratio.
We're doing our best. Hey, Brittany, it's been amazing talking to you today. Can we finish off with some rapid fire questions?
Sure. Thank you.
All right, Brittany, I want your hot takes, your hot fire. Give me your best shot. Here we go. Where do you sit on the Bitcoin maximalist to multi-coin opportunist spectrum?
Ooh, I probably am on the Bitcoin maximalist. I trend a little bit more that way, but obviously I think having diversity in coins, being an investor, you can't just take one bet. You have to have multiple bets.
Of course. Brittany, what would you say is your firmest conviction, crypto opinion?
That it will constantly be changing.
Of course. Hey, Brittany, Facebook's Libra coin. good or bad for the crypto ecosystem, and why?
Good, because it's making it mainstream and making people pay attention.
Yes. Putting you on the spot, Brittany, who is going to win the American presidential election in 2020?
Oh man, I hope it's Satoshi.
Oh, yes, I love it. Brittany, universal basic income as a potential fix for automation, AI, big tech. Good idea or bad idea?
Good idea, but it's been poorly executed.
Okay. Brittany, which person, group, or company is successfully applying the most leverage to crypto right now?
Bitcoiners, maybe? People who are trading in Bitcoin. I mean, there's so much arbitrage the past few days.
Sure, nice. Brittany, Bill Gates famously said we tend to overestimate what we can accomplish in 2 years and underestimate what we can accomplish in 10. What does the blockchain space look like in 10 years?
I think it'll be pretty mainstream. Everyone will have multiple cryptocurrencies. People will feel comfortable using wallets. And the same way we went from nobody used smartphones to everybody has smartphones.
Nice. Brittany, Arthur C. Clarke said any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. What do you think of when I say that?
Well, immediately that came to mind is like VR, which is unrelated to what we're doing. But I think when we think about living in the future, it's a full sensory experience. So that to me is magic.
Absolutely. Hey, Brittany, let's zoom out. What is the long-term future for the human race? Do you see dystopia or utopia?
I'm a utopia believer, even though I read lots of dystopian sci-fi novels.
Nice, I'm with you. Better to be positive. Brittany, what is your favorite science fiction book, film, or show?
Well, I recently finished Cryptonomicon, but I think Ready Player One was my first favorite sci-fi book.
Nice, yeah. So Cryptonomicon, that's the Neil Stephenson book, isn't it?
Yeah, and he's actually going to be speaking at the upcoming Blockstack Summit in October. So if you want to see him live, we'll be having a discussion, I think, between him and Naval.
I saw that. That'd be, I mean, that's a good pair of speakers there.
Yeah, he has a new book out, but I haven't been able to read it yet. But I think it's one of those really thick books that is very intimidating to look at. But once you get into it, it's hard to put down.
Even Cryptonomicon, I read that a long time ago, but that is a big hefty book as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I did it, I read it listening via audiobook, so I actually had no idea how long it was until I got started, so
yeah,
it didn't put me off too much.
Awesome. Hey, Brittany, thank you so much for talking to me today. Do you want to just tell the listeners where they can find you on your various platforms? Give a shout out to the Blockstack platforms, whatever you want to say.
Sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for having me, Andy. And if you want to find out more about Blockstack, I encourage you to go to blockstack.org. You can also learn more about our sale at stackstoken.com. And if you want to find us on the Twitter handles, everything, Telegram, we should be at Blockstack. For me personally, I'm on Twitter at BR_TTANY. I would love to follow up with any questions there as well. So thank you so much again.
All right, that's all, folks. Hey, thank you so much for listening, and thank you, Brittany. Wow, that was really fun. If you listened this far, you've made it to the end. Congrats. Thanks for sticking around. Really appreciate you listening. Don't forget, would love it if you could give us a rating. Click the subscribe button. Leave us a review if you want to. This was the Crypto Conversation for Brave New Coin.